Hello, folks. Today is my great honor to be able to have just a wonderful person we're so excited to have. This is Frank Keefe. If you don't know him, that you probably haven't been in the swimming world for long. We really are excited. Frank was the head coach of Yale University, head swim coach there. He's had a phenomenal background and still is having it. Frank, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me with you.
It's an absolute pleasure. Today's video is going to be 85 hours long as an introduction. Just joking. Frank has such a resume. It's unbelievable. He's been an Olympic coach a number of times, right? 3 times. Is that right, Frank?
Correct.
And has had such an amazing background in swimming. And he's for everybody in the swimming community is either knows Frank or knows somebody who knows Frank. That's the only way I can communicate that. Today, we're going to get an overview of Frank's background and his amazing experiences. Then little by little, we're going to be offering a few parts in this series so you can get to really know some of his incredible stories and the things that he's gone through. He's met presidents and president wives. He's just done pretty much everything that you could possibly imagine in the world of swimming and beyond. So Frank, just going to ask you real quick a few questions that'll take you back a ways. You've been in the swimming community how long?
I've been coaching over 60 years.
Okay. And before that, you were a swimmer as well, if I'm right.
I swam at Villanova University.
Right down the street from us here, right?
I basically was born and raised in the Yale pool. My father was an assistant coach to Bob Kippeth, and I had the availability to be able to go in and train with Bob and Harry Burke, who was the freshman coach at that time. Even in high school, my practices were in the Yale freshman team practices.
Wow. So you were kind of born into swimming to start with, and then just your whole life you've been in it. And so do you remember when you started, how old you were when you got in the pool first?
Probably about 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
My first meet, I was probably about 7 or 8. But back then, there was no age group swimming. Somebody had a swimming meet. Okay. It could have been in a pool. It could have been in Long Island Sound. It could have been a cross harbor swim. It's who could swim the furthest, the longest, and the fastest. My father actually coached an Olympian in Helsinki, a young man that swam for Ohio State, Frank Dooley.
So, and then you went on to even further that. So we're going to find out more about that. Can you tell us, and this could take all day, just this one question. What are some of your the highlights of your swimming career and swimming/coaching career that when you look back on it, because you have so many?
It varies so much. It varies from teaching somebody how to swim. We've taught people to push off and float, and they lay on the bottom of the pool. Or you get somebody in the water and say, okay, now this is what I want you to do, and they look like an Olympian. I think at this point in the game, you can almost, any coach could walk into a pool and within 3-4 minutes be able to pick out those kids that have the technical talent to be able to be good. I think that's one of the keys. Some of the highlights, of course, gold medal, having a gold medalist in Mexico City with Carl Roby, who was a great story in itself. Tim McKee losing the gold medal in Munich by 2/1000th of a second.
Back when they used to count that, right?
It's funny because he has never really mentioned it. He would say, that was years ago. First time I've heard him address it was about 2 weeks ago.
It lives inside you, that type of thing, doesn't it? Forever.
Yeah, and it's, I think the highlights. I mean, I had a girl at Yale who was captain of Yale, who ended up as a president of Gatorade. They're very successful. And I think that's one of the things that we look at least I look at, is that what happens to these people when they finish their career? I know that we're running into some psychological problems with kids. They've got to have some kind of more goals to be able to strive forward and set their goal on something new to accomplish.
Right, because they're such achievers, right? to start
There,
with. And if you
there,
don't give them something to do, it's going to be a problem.
I was very fortunate. I have a young man right now, and I'm not coaching him right now, but you may have read about him. I believe 50 years old. He's going to be the oldest competitor in the Olympic Games from a country in Africa. His name was Tony Blake. Now, Tony Blake is from the Chicago area, and he is going to represent his country in Africa, I believe, in a 50 and 100 freestyle in the Olympic Games. He is a very hard training person. I'm excited to watch what he's going to do.
Right.
And I think that he's laying down groundwork for an entire continent. This past weekend, he was supposed to swim in the Egyptian national championship. I haven't heard any results, but I'm sure that he's doing extremely well. But again, that's somebody that has a goal, is willing to go out and fight to be able to be good. You know, we just watched the Olympic trial. There's only one person that wins. Of course, in the trials, it's two that win, or track and field, in three that win. Once they get to the game, it's still only one person gets the gold medal. 5,000 other people are in there trying to be the best they can possibly be. And those people are extremely important.
And what I find that, and we're trying to bring more recognition, just like you said with that, Frank, is that the benefit that our community gives to those children, like parents that are thinking of, possibly going into swimming or having their child go into swimming. It's a big commitment. But at the same time, it's got a huge return, if I'm correct.
It's extremely important that you're dealing between an individual sport and a team sport. In basketball, football, soccer, whatever, you can throw the ball to somebody else and not have to pay the price. In swimming, there is no out. You don't get halfway through the mile and decide, well, I've had enough. Let somebody else do the rest of the swim to see how we finish. There is no we, even though in a relay, it's a composite, but it's, one of those things that teaches the individual how to win and how to lose. And I think the word lose is it doesn't mean that they're not doing the best. If there was a way of being able to monitor ability.
And I think there's some unexplainable factors in there as well. The way I look at it, Frank, and I completely agree with you, is that there's psychological and emotional aspects that you just can't measure. There's no way to measure them. And so what a person is limited to, you may have certain, what seems to be physical limitations, but when you factor in that emotional aspect, who knows what can actually happen.
I have a young lady that lives right next door, and she trains in her wheelchair as much as most athletes that I know. And there is no cutting back or going halfway. She puts in the time, the effort, the technique, and in the long run, she's going to be the best she can possibly be. And I think that that's one of the things that intrigued me about Special Olympics, which I think has sort of lost its flavor, that there has been an influx of people that I might question being. I had those athletes on my team at Yale. I had people that wanted to swim, and I never turned anyone down. In all the years I coached in college, I never cut a kid off the team. As long as you're willing to be there, do what you're asked to do, and do it to the best of your ability. Now, not everyone is going to do that every day. Not even we coaches. You're part of that team. It's part of the educational experience that we should be providing. It's a matter of who is teaching these kids discipline.
And a matter of belonging to something bigger than yourself, right?
Exactly.
I remember the first time I ever met you. Now, I'd seen you a lot on the deck, of course, everywhere. My coach, Doc Councilman, and you were, I think, quite good friends as well. I remember seeing you on the deck a lot, but I hadn't really met you until one day I walked past. I was in senior nationals. It was way after I finished my swimming career. I walked past the coach's room, and the only person in there was you sitting, relaxing for a moment. And I said, you know what? I got to go over and meet Frank. And I went over and shook your hand. I said, Frank, I'm John Waldman. The reception that you give every person, because you didn't know who I was from Adam, and it was just the kindness. You felt to me very much like Doc to me, is that you guys are like everybody's dad. And
Doc Councilman, when he first got into coaching, back around Cortland. He used to bring this Indiana team. I was a big strapping 125-pound, 6'4" athlete. It wasn't allowed out on a windy day. And I had to go there twice a day to drink milkshakes.
Right.
The funny thing was I would be sitting there most of the time with Doc. Doc didn't really need the milkshakes.
But he loved them, didn't he?
But because of my connection with Bob Kippeth and Harry Burke, he was somebody that was interested in anything about swimming and anyone who was interested in the sport. Doc was no different to anybody else. The fortunate thing that for me was maybe 5 or 6 years out of into my college career, I ran into one of his swimmers. I should say his first swimmer, George Breen. George, he passed away a year and a half ago. George was my best friend, and we would talk stories about Doc and about Kippeth. I really feel as though we missed the opportunity to do some recording of history of swimming that has gone down the drain.
Well, we're
Coaches
hopefully
nowadays
not going to miss any more of those opportunities, or not.
Oh, it's terrible. I asked a group of age group swimmers in New Haven one time, and I was coaching. I said, "How many of you know who Don Scholander is?" Now here's Don, big time athlete, Yale student, trained in the pool these kids are swimming in, probably within 10 years. I said, "How many of you know Don Scholander?" Now there were 23 kids. One kid put her hand up. And I said, "You mean there's only one person in this entire group that knows who Don Scholander is?" "Yeah." I said, "How do you know who Don Scholander is?" Her comment was, "My mother dated him."
You told me, and so we had a wonderful conversation that day. And then I reached back out to you because you could just connect so well. And I reached back out to you when we wanted to do a camp one time in Yale. And you immediately gave me some great advice. You said, you can try it, but I've tried it for years and it just financially doesn't work out too well. Trying to rent those facilities at Yale can be very costly. So I really appreciated the advice, and you kind of helped us, save a lot of time worrying about it. Ever since, just a couple things that you told me and we got connected with, just the way you make people feel and always have is so welcoming. You can see greatness when somebody's like that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I've been treated that way by all the people that I've run into in swimming. And it might be that I've had the door to be opened up. I went over and spent my first international trip in Tokyo. It was just absolutely fantastic to see these guys that you had heard stories about all your life through Kippeth. Kippeth was a great storyteller. There were some great stories about him. And now that a lot of his former athletes are passing away, I think it's important that we get those kind of stories on tape or on video and store it at the Hall of Fame. Maybe they could put it on the top of the tower.
The thing is what we're doing with this program that we have here, we'll launch it into social media, and then it'll live in an archive here. You're of course under Coaching Legends, but there's different categories that we have in our FM Discovery Center. And you had told me something in a conversation we had earlier, I think last week, and you had said that you had an amazing experience with a bunch of guys sitting down, great coaches all together. I think it was you and maybe Eddie Reese and couple others, is that right?
We were in Washington, D.C. at one of those meetings. I don't know which ASCA or college coaches. It probably was ASCA or something like that, because there were a lot of young coaches that were there. And it was maybe 4 or 5 of us sitting in the lobby, nothing to do. And we sat down and, we're just chit-chatting, or science or whatever that is. But we started, getting back on how we see the sport today, the direction in which it's going. What are you doing that's different? Have you used such and such? More information passed between the 4 or 5 of us that educated each one of us. I've always contended that I would love to run a seminar where you would have maybe 100 coaches invited, and you'd have to be invited to be in it, because you'd have to be somebody that's willing to speak up and talk about what they do honestly. I'd love to sit and talk with Eddie. I talked with Eddie back when I was a club coach back in the early 70s, when he was an assistant coach in Florida, and he was trying to recruit all my suburban kids. George Haynes, when George came in and took over my job at Foxcatcher when I went to Yale. George and I had some very, very deep discussions as to how this was going to work.
Right.
I mean, they're no different than anybody else, and they're willing. My God, how many times are you willing to have somebody ask you to comment on something that you really know,
Right.
or at least you think you know, or let's put it this way, that they think you know.
Right. Right.
I think those are important aspects to look at.
Right. Dick,
I think these are the things that we've got to look at the future, right, as to what and where are we going. Right. In my mind right now, it's the first time that I'm going to have to be planning my future in swimming without having a team. I mean, I'm going to be 84 years old.
That's okay.
I don't know whether I'll hit the next Olympiad.
The amount of information that you have and the value of it to our community, we can't lose that, right? We have to have that so it continues on. That's what we're trying to do with Councilman's information, his work. We'd love to do that with yours. We'd like to get coaches in like, Eddie Reese, John Urbanchek, Dick Scholberg, right? All these incredible people. If we can get that information and pass it on to others, we can leave our community better than it is today.
Just take one question. The Olympic trials that we just ran, is that a good way of running trials? After watching gymnastics, men and women, they're back to a panel. Now we're going to select 3, and the panel is going to select 4. No way. I want kids to have to perform to the best ability then and there. To be selected as an athlete on the team or a coach is extremely important. The job is a big responsibility, and it's a big commitment. And I think that those are things we've got to keep in mind for our club coaches. Right now, I don't see the club coach in a good position for getting the rewards unless you have an outstanding facility.
And with your experience, right? Because a lot of people can't see that. To understand that, I'm really helpful.
Well, when you went to Indiana, you didn't go because they had a 20-yard 3-lane pool.
I did not. That's true. I went for one reason, and that reason was Doc Councilman.
Pretty good reason.
Yep. And if he was in a mud puddle, that's where I would swim. And I remember growing up, I had, you remember that poster of Mark Spitz with all the medals?
Oh, yeah.
I had that right on my wall up in Monmouth, Maine, North Monmouth, Maine. Yeah. And to me, it was a long trip in. It was 45-minute trip in the middle of the winter on a Greyhound bus every day to practice. It was very, very great to go out to Indiana and have nice pools, but it really came down to, and I think for me, it's about the people and great people like yourself and Doc and things like that. I just feel so fortunate to have the opportunity to spend time with folks like you. They were built into you. And whether I'm talking to Doc Councilman or whether I'm talking to you, I know the general, right? And whether I'm talking to Eddie Reese, I know that it's going in the same direction. Everybody's, they may be different methods to get there, but you're all working at the same thing about developing and progressing and moving us forward. And you have tremendous trust in people that are willing to do that with you and spend their valuable time with you to do it.
Yeah, we've done all right. We've been very happy. Sort of reached our goals.
It is a passion of yours always.
I'll get there at least first in hard work.
I think you're strong in both categories, if I'm right, Frank. You're very smart. Just a real quick question that I have. I'm going to pull you into what's called the cornerstones of athletic performance here that Councilman taught us about. I don't know if you can see it on your screen here, but we have the fuels like sleep, hydration, nutrition, and oxygen. These are the major factors as we go through these cornerstones that impact swimming. And so those fuels are like the consumables, and the consumables get delivered through one of the 3 energy systems, which would be endurance, speed, or explosivity. explosivity being the system that you would use to like leap out of the way of an oncoming bus, for instance. And so the strawberry that you ate yesterday flows through one of those energy systems, depending on what it is that you're doing. And so if you're doing an endurance activity, you'll go through that, etc. And that energy then gets delivered to the muscle. The muscle contracts around the bones or the skeletal system, which is considered your technique, how you move those bones. And the bones get you to where you want to go. And the whole question is, do you know where you want to go and how to get there, which we would consider the mind. And then synergy is how you put all those together. Based on these 5 cornerstones and the center stone, which is the 6th one, just interested in your take on this, having been Olympic coach 3 times, head coach for Yale, just and being in swimming your entire life, being a great part of the swimming community. What do you see as one of the major I mean, all these are important factors. What sticks out to you as like this might be the most important to you?
Most important thing right now to me would be the psychological. You have to be able to get kids to believe in what they're doing day in and day out. Why am I putting my face down in the water for 4 hours a day? I mean, the coach is not always saying nice things to me, and I take it day in and day out. And we do all these other things, the nutrition, we do the physical stamina. And I think all of those things are important. I find right now, and I've made changes in the last few years that I coach, to be specific in what I'm training kids for. I mean, I was sort of, the knockdown, drag out, 20,000 a day, hard work, survival.
Right.
But if you don't have a plan, you're not going to be successful. I watched the 5,010. The poor guys in the 10,000 meter run must have run that thing 5 times. If you kept watching it on television, it was amazing. They never got tired. And it was also amazing the same guy won all the time.
When you think of the psychological thing and the emotional aspect of the brain, basically, there's 2 different aspects that at least like basic that I see. One being, for instance, your brain during training and what it allows you to go to, right? And then the other one is very different in racing. Is that correct or incorrect?
Correct. I think that you've got to be able, if you can find somebody who is a training partner that will race you, do it on a day-to-day basis. I think that's where you really can excel. It would be interesting to look at the top kids and who they train with and what their training is like. Who is Simone Manuel's training with? Why did she feel as though she was overtrained? What did she do to correct it?
Right.
I think little things like that are important.
So we had a number of people, Frank, that when we're talking to them, they'll say a lot of times, like, it's 90% mental and but basically I think over 95% of the people that we've interviewed have all had the same consensus that the mind is a major aspect of what you're doing. And that's a big deal. And when you look at programs, what type of program, if it's 90% mental or whatever the number is, what kind of program do we use to train those athletes in their minds?
It probably takes you 2 to 3 hours a day to write up the workout, because not only are you writing down what you want them to do, you want to be able to tell them how you want it done. I mean, it's a matter of saying, okay, to go 132 in 200 meter freestyle, you've got to be out in 50 seconds. You got to be back in 52. When you're training, doing 55s and 56s and 100s isn't doing it. And you do it until you fail. Over the years, I don't think that I've run into many kids that are willing to go past that level.
So
and a young man,
you challenge them physically to try to also challenge them mentally and emotionally. Is that right?
Exactly. If you can find them that'll challenge themselves. I'll give you a great example. A young man by the name of Tim McKee, probably the shortest man in swimming. Loses the 400 IM by 2/1000ths of a second. Comes back, doesn't do anything for almost 2 years. swims a little bit in college, wasn't really extremely interested in what he was doing. Then all of a sudden he decides, I'm going to take a run at this thing, and I'm going to go to Montreal. Here's what you have to do. And you've got to be able to do it on your own, because I can't be dealing with you as an individual and 110 kids just sort of sitting by, trying to do somewhat the same thing.
So we've designed a program called MindWorks that we recently presented on FINA. It has a way of helping people focus more. And so they could focus better. We've presented to the Navy SEALs, things like this. In addition to that, that's one piece of it. The second piece is to harness their emotion and to have the emotion work for them instead of against them or do nothing for them, which you see once in a while where the emotion's working against someone. And then also to progress faster. If you had someone that could focus better and use their emotion to help them and to progress faster, what would that mean in your world?
It would mean tremendous improvement over a short period of time. Now, whether they could continue that kind of pressure on themselves from one quadrennial to the next might be tough. As far as I know, there's still only 24 hours in the day.
Right.
So it's got to come from someplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm afraid that maybe it's coming from her training,
right,
or from her psychological,
or her personal time, right? That she needs to be Katie.
Yeah, exactly. And
Not
it's just a matter of
saying, Katie the person.
Yeah. When is my time?
That's always an important thing, to keep life balanced. Especially when you're moving through.
Not only for the athlete, but for the coaches.
That's right. Yeah. Because their time gets eaten up, right, constantly.
I'd love, the statistic of coaches that are married and coaches that are divorced. Young coaches that are getting in the college ranks right now and dealing with athletic directors who are brand new coming in, because they don't know. The athletic director doesn't know what the heck the sport demands. We're not making money like basketball and football coaches.
Right.
But we're probably putting in as much, if not more time.
Right.
Because we're dealing with every kid as an individual. Until you get to know these people who you're going to spend with more time with than any professor or their mother or father, probably over the next 4 years, you're doing them an injustice. You've got to be able to get as to who you're dealing with and where they want to go. Otherwise, you can't handle it. You end up dictating as to what you want, their goal to be, the direction in which you hope that they're going to go. And I think that's, again, communication. I don't think that all coaches communicate well. And I think the better we learn to communicate, the better off we are.
Are you saying that a lot of times there's an us involved, not just a you or a me, but it's an us working together?
It's a team.
And you need to know each other if you're going to be a good team, and what each other's motivations are, what turns a swimmer into, right, and what their passions are, things like this. Is that right?
Exactly.
Because if you don't know that, you can't get to the emotional energy that's going to channel to get that job done.
Well, I think this is the direction. It seems to be that one of the directions in which you're going to with your FINA presentation.
Right.
Is that how do we unleash this power that we have of who we are?
Right.
Because once you understand who you are and what you really want to do, you can get to excel.
Frank, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I just feel like we're just getting started here. I'm hoping you're going to come back and we can get some more stories for the community, and where people can really get the benefit and understanding your experiences and your incredible capability to impact young folks.
Plus, I got a nice tan today, too.
That's right.
It's only 95 degrees where I'm sitting.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
John, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
and we'll be in touch soon. And folks, if you like this interview, watch for more coming out. We'll be able to hopefully have Frank back, and he can tell you even more of his great experience.
We may even give you a free bathing cap.
There we go. I love that. Thanks so much, Frank.
Okay, John. Thanks.
All right. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.